report. We're joined by the full team now, Adam and Don. We're going to talk about the Big 12 Conference. Not a bad week for the Big 12. They go 12-0, perfect slate, one of the best weeks in conference history. You know, we started out with the Baylor Bears. They get a pretty good win over Northwestern State. I know Northwestern State's not exactly a high-tier program, but they win 51-6, and Mr. Griffin keeps continuing to develop as a passer. He had a pretty darn good week.
Yeah, I think the Bears now, they know who their quarterback is going to be.
Yes, they do.
And it was no secret what Robert Griffin's athleticism is. We were talking a guy who literally is a world-class hurdler in track and field, and it's no secret also that he was a terrific football player in high school because he led his football team to a 12-2 year last year at Copper's Cove. But for him to do it as a freshman, I think one of the keys for him was, he's a second semester guy. He was a midterm enrollee, and so obviously being able to go through spring practice, I believe, helped him.
Right, and you talk about this weekend, we were just kind of chatting about, they got a chance to start the season, with two really good wins, over Northwestern State. They get Washington State this weekend, who has not had a fun time to start the season. They get beat by Oklahoma State and absolutely destroyed by Cal this weekend. The Bears could start 2-1, and like you said, a win over a BCS conference opponent.
Exactly, and that's the thing about Washington State is that they're kind of in a down cycle. They've had their years where they've been a Rose Bowl team, but right now they're in a down cycle. New coach, and so they're going through those growing pains. So. A big opportunity, I think, for Art Briles and the Bears if they could go knock off a team from the Pac-10. I think they have a legitimate opportunity to do so.
Right, and Adam, you and I talked last week about the Colorado Buffaloes getting to play Eastern Washington. They had themselves a little bit of a football game in Boulder Saturday.
They sure did, and I really, I'm doing weekly picks now in my blog. I'll go ahead and plug that real quick, Zuvi's Views. Feel free to check it out.
Good job,
You got to plug your own stuff, right? Anyway, I did my weekly picks, and I picked Colorado winning 31-21. And I said, Colorado, we'll find out pretty quick how good the Eagles are, even for a 1-2-8 team. One of the comments I got was, there's no way Colorado's going to win by 10. I can understand maybe 28. Sure enough, they hold on by 7 points on a late score. I think Eastern Washington, as they proved to Texas Tech, is a good team. I mean, they may battle Appalachian State for the Division I title.
They really should.
The thing about Colorado, they need to just continue. They just need to keep playing the kind of teams that they usually play, because Colorado, in this age where Big 12 teams are criticized by their fans for scheduling 1AA opponents in non-conference, Colorado generally goes the other way. You look on their schedule, okay, they got West Virginia coming up, then Florida State. You look on some of their future and past schedules, you see Georgia, Minnesota, Cal. They have home and home with all those teams. But Eastern Washington, they need a late touchdown to break a 24-24 tie, and it was kind of similar to a game they had a couple of years ago where they played Montana State and just beat them 19-10. So
right.
Colorado may be better off just to keep playing the West Virginias and the Florida States of the world.
And speaking of West Virginia, the Buffaloes, they're off this Saturday. Next week, they welcome the Mountaineers. That should be a pretty competitive game. Being in Boulder, they probably have a little bit better chance than going to Morgantown. Iowa State this week, they beat Kent State 48-28, a little revenge after Kent State made their season look real bad last year. They got a chance to maybe start 3-0, a little tougher this week, guys. The Iowa Hawkeyes, the big interstate battle.
I think the Cyclones are going to come back down to earth this week. You're playing the Hawkeyes. I see Iowa winning this game. Iowa State, they haven't really shown much yet. They've beaten up on a couple of cream puffs, as we like to say. So, I don't know. If Iowa State can keep this game close, I think they can. It's a good sign for them. But I don't see them winning.
I tell you what, I think it's going to be close. This is a very important game for Gene Chizik. And one of the things about Iowa State and Iowa, it's obviously the huge rivalry game.
Right.
But Iowa State has had a remarkable amount of success against Iowa. But between 1998 and 2002, they beat them 5 years in a row, and I thought that was a huge deal for Dan McCarney's program. And then it kind of cycled back, and Iowa got the better of them there for a little while. But in 2005, McCarney's team beat them again when Iowa was ranked number 8 when they came to Ames. And then last year, it was a rough year for Gene Chizik last year. They got 3-9, but they beat the Hawkeyes 15-13. And I think it's very important for him to either at least make a good showing against Iowa, and also if he could beat them 2 years in a row, because it's a huge thing, I think, for recruits within, in Iowa and also the surrounding area.
Definitely. And down the road a little ways, the Kansas Jayhawks, they had a really impressive performance Saturday, a 29-0 shutout over a Louisiana Tech team that had beaten Mississippi State the week earlier. And if you have not had a chance, get online and watch the Desmond Briscoe touchdown catch, one of the best runs of the young season so far.
Desmond Briscoe, another one of those Texas kids. He was on that Cedar Hill state championship team a couple of years ago. Terrific talent. I think he kind of gets overshadowed a little bit in the Big 12, but only a sophomore. You're going to hear a lot more from that guy.
And Todd Reesing was outstanding in that football game.
Yes, I mean, he's looked great. The entire Jayhawks team has looked great so far. I'm anxious to see, though. They beat Louisiana Tech. I don't even remember.
FIU.
Yeah, Florida International the first week. This week they get a little bit more of a test. South Florida coming in, a ranked team. They've got to go on the road to South Florida this week. So I think Kansas is going to be tested a lot more this week, which is probably good for them at this point in the season. They have looked awfully good. We'll see how they look against a better opponent this week.
Yeah, and that game is actually Friday night in South Florida on national TV. That's number 13 or 12 versus number 19. That should be a good football game and really give a lot of good indications on where the Jayhawks really stand this year. Their cross-state friends, the Kansas State Wildcats, I'm going to go ahead and call out Tim Griffin from ESPN. He called Kansas State the most underrated team in the Big 12 this week in a blog. I'm going to challenge that hardcore. You don't beat the crap out of North Texas and Montana State and earn a lot of respect.
Well, hang on. No, they did it 45-6 and 69-10. So we were talking in a previous segment about Texas Tech not winning games convincingly. Hey, Kansas State's winning games convincingly, at least you can say on their behalf. Josh Freeman, during the preseason Big 12 Conference Media Days in July up in Kansas City, he was asked, who's the best quarterback in the Big 12? And, most of the answers to that are Chase Daniel or Graham Harrell or Todd Reesing or Colt McCoy. Right. And Josh Freeman and Sam Bradford. And Josh Freeman jumped out there and said, I think I'm the best quarterback in the Big 12. Well, so far he's playing like it, he's backing it up.
The quarterback has got to have that confidence. He's got to exude that he's the best guy on the field every time they step out there. He's got to have his teammates believe that. As to being underrated, that may be a fair statement, because I think Kansas State isn't really considered as a strong team in the Big 12. They really aren't rated, which means they're underrated.
Right, and right now you look at, they have a little bit of an odd scheduling thing now. They're off this weekend, and then they play Louisville next Wednesday, a midweek game. That's got to be a little bit weird for a scheduling conflict, but you were right on Freeman. He has shown a lot more efficiency in his passing and a better control of that offense. It seems like he's gotten through some of the mistakes that he made his first 2 years at Kansas State.
Well, remember, he was a guy who started as a freshman, and so he's played a lot of football, but he also was kind of thrown to the wolves there early on. Not because maybe there were other options, but just because he's a really talented kid, and so they played him right from the beginning as a freshman, and now as a junior, he's a guy who has a lot of experience under his belt.
Right. And the Missouri Tigers this week, after that great game against Illinois to start the season, they hammer Southeast Missouri State 52-3. Jeremy Macklin seems like he's perfectly fine. He had a touchdown in that game. That was a very impressive win for them. They were basically done at halftime in terms of their starters and pulled them out of the ball game.
That's right. I'm starting to wonder, is Missouri going to score 52 points in every game this season? They've done it twice in a row now against a pretty decent team in Illinois, against Southeast Missouri State, which you'd expect to walk over in that game. Their offense is looking really good right now. You could argue they have the best offense in the Big 12, I think.
That's a fair argument.
It'd be interesting to see how they do against Nevada. After Nevada put up a pretty good fight against Texas Tech at their place, they might be a little emotionally drained. They probably put a lot into that game. I think them going to Missouri, the Wolfpack going to Missouri, I think they're going to get their tails whooped.
Yeah. Key thing there, I think, for Nevada is they have to be able to control the ball with their running game, kind of in the manner that they did against Tech. and shorten that game. Have some drives that eat up the clock, so they keep the ball out of Chase Daniel and Jeremy Macklin's hands as much as they can.
And that game Saturday on national TV as well. That'll be interesting to see how Nevada responds to another high potent offense out of the Big 12 Conference. A little bit different though, being in Columbia as opposed to having Texas Tech last week in Nevada. And the Nebraska Cornhuskers, guys, I'm going to be a little bit harsh on them as well. Coach Pelini's going to take some time to get that program turned around and back the traditions that those people expect. But they beat San Jose State 35-12. That game was 14-12 in the fourth quarter. They about got themselves in a ton of trouble there.
Yeah, I think you're going to see with Nebraska a lot of what the other Big 12 teams with new coaches are going through, such as Texas A&M, Art Briles at Baylor. They probably don't have the best athletes at this point, not the athletes that Cornhusker fans are accustomed to having. Pelini will probably get that turned around. And any team with a new coach early in the season, you may have a game like this where you don't play very well, just like Colorado did, where they got a scare at home. They still haven't played anybody. They're not really going to play anybody, I don't think, until Big 12 play.
No, they got Virginia Tech. And Lincoln. That'll be a tough game.
Well, one benefit, though, for Nebraska, of course, is with that schedule, they don't leave home until
conference play.
October 11th. Their game right here in Lubbock is Bo
Yeah.
Pelini's first road game as head coach of the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and that's still more than a month away.
Right, and they get New Mexico State this weekend, who's playing their first game. They've been dormant the first 2 weeks, so that'll be an interesting scenario to see how that works out. And then, of course, they get Virginia Tech before heading down to Lubbock for the first conference game. The Oklahoma Sooners, they beat Cincinnati 52-26, a very impressive second half performance by that team, the emergence of a strong freshman wide receiver in Mr. Broyles. But, one thing I saw early on was Oklahoma has a little bit of weakness. I think misdirection plays out of the spread offense causes them a little bit of trouble, and that was a pretty good game for up to a certain point when Cincinnati's quarterback was unfortunately had his leg broke and went out of the game. And from that point, Oklahoma really showed why they are one of the best in the Big 12.
Misdirection plays out of the spread offense, so you found the Sooners' weakness on defense.
Hey, after seeing the disappointments in BCS bowls over the last few years, being from Oklahoma, you're going to watch for those little triggers early in the season to see where the problem might come from. And, to Cincinnati's credit and Coach Brian Kelly, they did a good job against OU early in that football game.
It was a lot closer, I think, than anyone would have guessed for that stretch of time in the first half. But like you said, teams early in the season, they probably need a little bit of that. They need to be challenged a little bit to see how they respond. And Bob Stoops found out that his team can respond pretty well in a situation like that.
Right, on Saturday, they returned to the state of Washington, where the last time they went up to play Oregon, they didn't have a real fun time. This week, they get Jake Locker and the Huskies, who are coming off an absolutely heartbreaking loss to BYU after that little scenario played at the end of the game.
Memo to the Sooners: when you score a touchdown, don't throw a ball in the air.
Yeah, please do not throw the ball in the air because they will flag you. And then, unfortunately, Locker gets flagged, and they move the extra point back 15 yards, and it gets blocked, and they lose 28-27. So this week they'll be looking for a little bit of a better showing against OU, but guys, probably too much offensive power for Oklahoma.
Yeah, I think so, but I think this is a game that Washington can probably keep close, especially playing at Washington. We made a reference to the Oregon game. That may still be in the back of some of their minds over in Sooner country. I'm sure a lot of the players are gone from that team that lost to Oregon. But, it could be one of those uncomfortable things. Like, Don wrote about Texas Tech going west and often not playing very well or kind of having a letdown there. And maybe the Sooners will experience the same thing. I still think they're going to win. I just don't see a blowout.
I kind of disagree with Adam there. I think the talent on the two sides, big advantage, I think, for the Sooners, and regardless, I think, of where they play. If Oklahoma just goes out and plays its game, I think OU should win this one fairly comfortably. Maybe 17 points, 24 points, 3 or 4 touchdown range. I think is very attainable for the Sooners. I just think they're a much better team than Washington.
Yeah, and I agree. And every week they're going to get better and going to get more impressive. And I don't see that game being real close. In Oklahoma State on the other side of the spectrum this week, they get a 56-37 win over Houston, where Des Bryant has a great game, maybe the next great receiver out of Oklahoma State. 4 touchdowns, 236 yards for the Cowboys.
I think everybody kind of knew that this was coming, and Des Bryant had a good year last year. and I think probably a springboard to, I mean, here's a guy who, of course, was a huge blue chip recruit. Texas Tech recruited him, would have loved to have had him in Mike Leach's offense. And so games like that are kind of what I think the Cowboys and Cowboys fans were expecting, and it's probably not going to be the last time that you see Des Bryant have 200-plus yards in a football game.
Right, and Saturday they get Missouri State at home. Should be a pretty easy game for them, and then we'll get into conference play and see where Oklahoma State really stands. But it looks like they are a little bit better, and they're going to be in contention in the Big 12 South. I think that's safe to say at this point in time.
I think they definitely have the offense to contend in the Big 12 South. I'd like to see them maybe be a little better on defense, hold teams down a little more. Playing Missouri State, you'd like to think that they shouldn't give up more than 2 touchdowns to a team like that. So, I think Oklahoma State offensively in great shape. Show me some defense, and then we'll see how you can do in conference play.
You're right about that. Although we talked about Des Bryant a moment ago, I think one of the things that probably impressed me more about OSU than the big receiving numbers was you have a second straight 100-yard game for Kendall Hunter, who's a little scat back type. He scored a touchdown against Texas Tech up there last year, and that's one of the things that you always get from the Cowboys is they are really they really believe in the running game, and they're able to execute it. And year after year, that the names may change, and sometimes it's a rotation of 2 backs and 3 backs, but they always get good productivity. It seems like out of the running game, it looks like they're off to a good start again in that regard.
Pretty good pedigree of running backs up there. A couple guys named Thomas and Sanders ran on that field a few times, so nothing new for Oklahoma State in terms of that. And Adam, the Texas Longhorns this week, they beat UTEP 42-13, struggled a little bit early, but Colt McCoy really has a nice second half, and they take care of business.
Yeah, Colt McCoy has looked really good so far this season, the first 2 games. So have the Longhorns. They've been putting up the points. The defense has been pretty good. What I really was impressed with was the way they bounced back from kind of a sluggish first quarter and really took control of the game in the second quarter. I believe they scored on 4 straight possessions. It was pretty much smooth sailing from there. So I think the Longhorns are happy with what's going on now. I got to say, as a UT alum, I'm pretty excited about this week. Just because Arkansas is coming to town. This is anytime Texas and Arkansas get together, no matter the sport, it's always exciting. It's always nasty, so to speak. The 2 schools have hated each other for a very long time, since back in the Southwest Conference. So it ought to be a fun game. I'm looking forward to it.
So did you razz some of the Hoggat fans when you were in college, Adam?
No, not too much. Unfortunately, I never had a chance to watch a game with the Arkansas Razorbacks. But I do definitely remember the 2 matchups they had in 04 and 05. Arkansas comes to Austin and beats Texas. Ruins pretty much any hopes they have for a national title shot. The next year, Texas goes to Arkansas and wins. And it kind of returns the favor.
If there's any downside of that UTEP game last weekend, they give up 412 yards. I know the Longhorns have a young secondary, but how big a concern was that?
Well, it is. Anytime you see 412 yards, that really jumps out at you. But if I'm Mac Brown or if I'm a defensive coordinator Will Muschamp, I'm looking at the number of points UTEP scored, 13. Texas gave up 10 points the first week, 13 the second week. I think the young secondary is still going to need time to grow. They're going to have mistakes. They're going to give up some big plays. But I don't think the Longhorns are too disappointed with what they're doing right now.
And of course, Bob Petrino is the head coach at Arkansas. Last time I checked, he hasn't left yet. It's too early in the season to do that quite yet.
I think he'll be there at least through the weekend.
Through the weekend, okay. Well, Adam says he'll be there for the weekend, so I'll trust you on that. Texas A&M guys, they get one in the win column finally. They beat New Mexico 28-22. But Adam, they do it without Stephen McGee, who was injured in this football game.
That's right. Stephen McGee, the senior, went down on the first series of the game with a separated shoulder. Didn't return to the game. But you know what? No problem for the Aggies. Gerard Johnson comes in, throws 3 touchdown passes, and A&M wins its first game under new coach Mike Sherman. Mike Sherman said yesterday that if as long as McGee's healthy, he's our guy. He's going to be the starter.
Right.
A&M has this week off before hosting Miami next Saturday. It sounds like McGee's going to be the guy, but the question is, should he be? This new quarterback, the young quarterback comes in, leads you to a victory after a really lackluster performance in the opener with Stephen McGee. If I'm Mike Sherman, I'd take a very hard look at putting Johnson in there next time.
And our colleague down at the Bryan College Station Eagle, Robert Cessna, wrote this week that the Aggies could be a pretty good team 2 or 3 years from now. But you read between the lines, and he has pretty much written off their chances for this year. So they are not one of the best teams in the Big 12. So they might be the 7th best if they're lucky. They may be the worst team in the Big 12. That's how bad they are talent-wise. Johnson threw gave him 3 touchdown passes last Saturday, but he also was sacked 3 times. They said it could have been a lot more if not for his escapability, because their offensive line is so bad and so young. So I think if you subscribe to the school of thought that the Aggies have some young talent and they need to develop it, go with Johnson. I think what you might be seeing, though, is Mike Sherman's NFL background, where he's trying to win a game this weekend. And he probably still feels like Stephen McGee, with all the experience that he's accumulated over the last 3-4 years, is still the guy who gives them the best chance to win.
Well, and that may be the case, and obviously, McGee is popular at College Station. He's had 2 wins over Texas, which always sits well with Aggie fans. He's the guy. He's the face of the program. But as you said, you've got to look to the future. They probably aren't going to be very competitive in the Big 12 this year. I think it's a tough call. I think maybe you play McGee if he's healthy, but you make sure Johnson gets his fair share of snaps just to get his feet wet, just to give him an idea of what it's going to be like for the next couple of years.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for our Big 12 portion of the show, and that's going to wrap up the 3rd episode of the Red Raider Report, guys. Remember, hey, Saturday night, Texas Tech takes on SMU. After the game, get online. We'll have a little recap of the football game for you. And always remember, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Campus Design at 98th and Quaker. Get down there and check them out. And as always, any news on Texas Tech from these guys, RedRaiders.com, LubbockOnline.com, all a product of the Lubbock Avalanche-Journal. For Don and Adam, we're going to see you next week. Texas Tech Saturday night, SMU at Jones Stadium.